So here we say, are there individuals who are doing well or standing out? Because at the end of the day, government is currently, I think we have about 22 cabinet secretaries and many other government officials. So are there government officials that are perceived by Kenyans to be doing well? And who are they? And then after that, we give an overall rating of how Ruto is performing in fulfilling campaign promises. And here we give just an average score. We've given you the achievements, we've given you the weaknesses, but here we just give an average score. And here we ask Kenyans, looking at everything in totality, what is the average score you'd give to President Ruto? So let's go to the best performing cabinet secretaries. So here, we asked the respondents to mention one. Don't forget there are like 22 cabinet secretaries. So any percentage that you don't see below 1%, there are some who go 0.01, 0.2, and so on. Here we're talking about the best. So if it's a single mention, and they're not allowed to give more than one. So we see that the Cabinet Secretary of Interior and National Administration, is ranked number 1 with 34% mention. So over a third of Kenyans feel that this Cabinet Secretary is doing very well or is the best performing, followed by Ezekiel Machogu of Education, followed by Susan Wafula of Health, and then Ababuna Mwambwa of Sports. But if you look at these percentages, you have one Cabinet Secretary getting 34% mentions from Kenyans, and then you have others getting 1%. What we found interestingly, and I want to focus on the Cabinet Secretary for National Treasury and Planning, he was very visible in the media last month, but I guess he was delivering bad news and not good news to Kenyans, and that's why he actually gets only 1% mentions. Education is always the Cabinet Secretary for Education is always one that is seen, especially during the exam period, and has 7% mentions. And then health, we started seeing this Cabinet Secretary being visible. So what we did is that we then said, because we ran this question in the previous survey, which was in March, has there been change? And we are seeing that Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki's mentions have increased from 26% to 34%. Ezekiel Machogu's have reduced from 10 to 7%. And Susan Wafula she was at 1% mention, so she's increasing her visibility and engaging with the public. It's gone up to 6%. Ababuna Mwambwa has remained the same, and then also Kipchumba Murkomen has remained the same. So what we feel, especially when we looked at these findings, we feel that when a cabinet secretary or his or her ministry is visible in terms of on the ground and of course also through the media, Kenyans are more likely to know how the ministry is performing and what kind of offering they're giving to the public, and therefore they're likely to be given mentions. When a cabinet secretary or a ministry is too quiet, Kenyans don't know. So maybe they're doing many, many good things, but Kenyans don't know. We were looking at the cabinet secretary list, and we were wondering, during the campaign period, there were some politicians who were very, very loud. Every time they got onto a podium, they were campaigning very strongly for the president. Now that they've been made cabinet secretary, we don't see them. So what has happened? Were they just very good politicians and not being very effective at running a ministry? And I don't want to mention name. I'm sure you can even think of one or two as I give this illustration. So that's what you're seeing, that cabinet secretaries who are visible and engaging the public are likely to be rated highly. So if we were to look at the cabinet secretary, Kindiki, who's rated number 1, he's been very visible in the media, whether for good or bad things. But I think the most significant one has been how Shakahola was handled, investigation and ensuring that the bodies are recovered and so on. There's also been the banditry up in the north. We saw him sorting that out, flying from one location to another and sorting that out. And most recently, there was this thing he said in the media, telling the Azimio protesters, go ahead and protest. In fact, he said, it's okay for you to protest so long as you don't damage any property. So I think for me, if what we're seeing is that if a cabinet secretary engages, then Kenyans are likely to see what he or he thinks and rate him highly. Let's look at Ezekiel Mashogu. I can bet that if you're to do this study January next year, just immediately after the national examinations, his ratings would actually go up because national exams always happen at the end of the year. The media also follow him around in India, the initiatives around exams, and if that examination is seen to be credible, then his ratings are likely to go up. Let's talk about the health CS, Susan. If you compare with the previous cabinet secretary, who was quite visible because we had a crisis, a pandemic, and was very visible. So for her, she has to basically chart her own path and engage on issues that are relevant to the Mwananchi. So this is a slide that talks about, asks Kenyans, on a scale of 0 to 5, how would you rate Ruto's government in implementing its campaign promises? And here we're asking the respondent to think about everything in totality, everything. We're not asking them, why do you say so? We're just saying, looking at everything in totality, how do you score the president? So the overall score from the total sample is 30.8%. The overall score from those who are pro-government is 43.6, which is below average. Proposition are very harsh. They rate President Ruto at 18.4. And then those who don't feel affiliated to any political party or coalition give him a rating of 26.4. So, assuming your child came to you with a report form, or you got a report form saying your overall score is 30.8%, is that a good score?
No.
Definitely not. And if you remember, what are the reasons? The reasons are Kenyans are feeling the country is going the wrong direction, and the key issue is harsh economic times.